Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Yadir Gomez, and today my topic presentation is going to be covering the idea of the immutability of intelligence. People who tend to have that in perspective that intelligence is immutable tend to believe that they're born with a certain level of intelligence and that it's unchanging. Now, in order to identify the question at hand, we first need to have a little bit of contextualization in regards to what intelligence is. Intelligence is the characterization of an individual's ability to acquire knowledge and skills. And intelligence can be further divided into three main domains that I subscribe to: the idea of fluid intelligence, the idea of crystallized intelligence, and the idea of emotional intelligence, all of which have differentiating factors in regards to what distinguishes them. Now we're going to go on defining the three individual domains and what they entail. First of which we focus on fluid intelligence. What is fluid intelligence? Fluid intelligence is the capacity to think logically and solve problems in new situations. I think of it as almost the critical thinking ability or aspect of your mind. It is the ability to think abstractly. I think that artists, for an example, have a really strong connection to this fluid intelligence. Next of which is crystallized intelligence. And this is a type of intelligence that I feel like the majority of us are more familiar with because schools tend to focus on crystallized intelligence. It is the ability to accumulate knowledge, facts, and skills through acquired learning and experiences. For example, college is a perfect environment to grow this level of intelligence. Crystallized intelligence tends to increase with age, and it measures by tasks that require the application of acquired skills. And last of which, and honestly, I feel like is largely pushed to the side, is that of emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence involves one to recognize, understand, and manage one's own individual emotions. People tend not to characterize this as an important aspect of emotional intelligence, but in order to understand others, one first needs to understand the self and then characterize the emotions that they feel into potential conversations and possible means of identifying other people's emotions. As such, this involves skills such as empathy, self awareness, self regulation, social awareness, and relationship management. Because of my background in both biology and psychology, one question that I found the most interesting is the idea of my parents are smart. Does that mean I will be? This plays into the role or the idea of gene regulation and how genes and heritability play a role in intelligence. A twin study showed that individual differences in human intelligence can largely be explained by genetic influences, making intelligence one of the most heritable traits. It's not like there's an intelligence gene present within our genome that codes for our intelligence, but more so it's attributes that code for the ability to have this cultural intelligence that we have defined. Another big aspect of this is if you direct your attention to the graph present here, it showed that brain structure is not fixed on one particular developmental time point and it remains unaltered the rest of our lives. Gray matter, which is depicted in this image here, changes in volume throughout our childhood as well as our adulthood, and increased thickness of gray matter of multiple cortical areas correlates with general intelligence. As such, this is definitive evidence that intelligence is something that changes throughout your livelihood. It's not something that is finite and determined instantly. As such, the idea of my parents are smart, will I be? Yes, you may be predisposed to more growth or more cognitive development, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you'll be the level of intelligence that your parents will be, because you also have to understand the different environmental stimuluses that impacted the intelligence and experiences that your parents have accrued. This ties into building intelligence. As we previously noted, we tied into the idea of how genes play a role in regards to heritability of intelligence and make one more predisposed to be intelligent. But this doesn't necessarily mean that because they have these predispositions, they are going to be smart. We talk about building intelligence of the different sectors that we mainly discussed. That of emotional intelligence, for an example. Recognizing the self to help the others. This is an important part when it comes to the recognition of emotional intelligence. How can you expect to help someone in their situation or recognize their emotions when you can't sympathize or empathize with them and put yourself in the same position? Understanding how you would feel is a perfect representation in regards to understanding how someone else might feel. This is important because human emotion is one of the most complicated things in this world. And If you're not able to understand your own emotions, you won't be able to understand someone else. This is why practices like journaling your emotions serve as a very good tool in regards to building this aspect of intelligence. We next tie into that of crystallized intelligence. What you are doing now is a perfect example of building crystallized intelligence. You are in a university where crystallized intelligence, memory, and things of this nature are constantly pushed into you in order for you to succeed academically. Never stop learning and always read. The moment that you subject yourself to a period of stagnation where you're not actively recalling the information you learned and you're not actively seeking new things, you begin to stagnate in regards to this field of intelligence. This also ties into fluid intelligence. Fluid intelligence is characterized by more problem solving and critical application. Think of it in this nature. Being someone who is in a biology background, I try to implement some aspects of biology in other coursework in order to properly understand the material. This allows me to web more complex ideas into otherwise fields that I wouldn't have been able to if I didn't take my biology courses. As such, this ties into the main idea of how difficulty breeds improvement. The moment that you start doing things that are easy, that don't come difficult, that don't result in you thinking heavily and thinking critically, it'll result in a decrease in fluid intelligence because you're no longer implying yourself. We thus tie this into different schools of thoughts of psychologists present within this field. We look at Spearman's G factor, who proposed that general intellect underlies all mental abilities. What this means is that he attributed one factor, one G factor, that plays a role in all forms of intelligence that we know of. We then tie this into Steinberg's triarchal theory, which is a three-part theory that characterizes intelligence into componential, exponential, and contextual. Componential compares and analyzes and evaluates different types of processes correlated with different exams, such as IQ exam. We have experimental, which invents new solutions to new problems and transfers skills to new situations. This is very reminiscent of fluid intelligence. And then we have contextual, which applies the things that you know every day to the context of life. I also tie this into fluid intelligence sense of it's bridging other ideas into new ideas to form complex web of ideas, of connections. Due to the complexity of intelligence and in regards to identifying how intelligence functions and how it works, you see the arising of a lot of misconceptions in our society. For an example, the IQ test determines how smart I am. Because intelligence is so multifaceted, there's no way of coming up with a test that measures all forms of intelligence in a manner that is accurate. In this regard, we also have the idea that intelligence is binary. I'm either smart or dumb. We just previously talked about how intelligence comes in different fields. As such, some people who may not be the best verbally can excel in areas of analytical or critical thinking. Intelligence equates to academic success. This is entirely wrong, and people tend to have this notion. I used to have this notion. Intelligence doesn't necessarily measure one's ability to be academically prosperous. In term, what I mean that in current academic structure, we tend to focus on more crystallized intelligence viewpoints. We don't care about emotional intelligence, and in regards to fluid intelligence, it's not tested as much as it is crystallized intelligence. Intelligence is uniform. We talked about that intelligence is multifaceted. This is in turn means that intelligence is not uniform. Some cultures may have different definitions in regards to what intelligence is and how intelligence is successful. Last of which, intelligence is based on memory. This is entirely false. We've talked about emotional intelligence, we talked about crystallized intelligence, we've talked about fluid intelligence. It's not just memory based, it's multifaceted. As such, because of this multifaceted aspect that I tend to subscribe to, who is right? I tend to subscribe to Howard Gardner's theory of what intelligence is because he emphasizes that individuals possess varying degrees of different intelligent types. And because of these different types, they all interact in an interwoven way in complex fashion that shape an individual's unique cognitive profile. As such, he talks about the failures of education as it tends to focus on mathematical intelligence, logical intelligence, and linguistic intelligence, while neglecting all the other forms of intelligence. How many times have you found yourself enjoying classes such as music and art just for them to be taken away in your later years? And in this regard, it kind of formulates the idea that intelligence is something that is so complex that it can't be readily defined. As such, the academic system right now currently doesn't really paint a picture for what intelligence is. This is why you always see people who never spent time in school, who dropped out of high school, who are some of the smartest people you know. Thank you so much for your time. These were the resources used.